Thank you for having me. Thank you, Skyfi, for putting this on. I graduated from UT several years ago, and so it's kind of surreal to come back. When I graduated, I joined the government. I worked at cyber issues there for almost a decade. And when I went to join the government, all my friends were like, this is the almost uncool thing ever. You're a nerd. You're boring." And it's crazy to just come back, 10, 15 years later. And while I'm still a nerd, like to see in Austin people excited to build for tech and to build for defense is a really cool thing. But on a slightly darker note, I want to start out by thinking of some of the most devastating cyber attacks in recent years. So think of WannaCry, NotPetya, these ransomware attacks. Think of SolarWinds. And think of, besides their destruction, what the common thread uniting all of those were. And the common thread was, it was a human. It was somebody who clicked a link, somebody who downloaded malicious malware, somebody who forgot to install a security patch correctly. And that brings me to the first truism of cybersecurity. And that is, just like all business is personal, all cyber is personal too. And that's our biggest vulnerability, and that's a bad thing. So therefore, the prevailing approach in the cybersecurity industry has been, okay, for us to reduce our risk, for us to get to 100% security, we need to either remove humans or rewire them so that humans are no longer a vulnerability. And you see sort of CISOs doing that with their spending. The security awareness market is a $10 billion market now. This is an industry that's grown and ballooned tenfold in less than a decade. Global cybersecurity spend is growing 15% a year, over $200 billion per year. But what we're seeing is, despite all of these attempts for automation, despite all of these attempts to rewire humans, we're seeing limits of human cognition. It's not just that humans are sloppy, that humans are lazy, but our systems are stressing humans beyond the limits of what their cognitive abilities are. When a human has to intake tens of thousands of signals per day, right, in alerts, when a human has to think about 15 different passwords depending on what system that they're on, when a human has to context switch every 5 minutes, it takes them half an hour to fully get back into what they were doing before, what we're expecting humans to do is beyond what we would expect a machine to do. And so I want to think back to those three cyber attacks that I talked about at the beginning. What was the reason that remediation attempts happened? What was the trigger for those? In all three cases, it was a human as well, just as it was a human for the trigger for the breach. It was a human who identified a kill switch in the malware. It was a human who successfully repatched their software, repatched their network. And that brings me to my second truism of cyber, which is that all cyber is personal, and that's a good thing. Humans possess capabilities that AI and that machines cannot. Humans have context awareness. Humans are able to learn from failure. Humans are able to do context switching and pattern matching. Machines just don't have the ability to do so. And no amount of training, no amount of machinery will be able to rewire and retool humans, right? Think of when you're an employee just trying to do your job. There's nothing that's going to get in the way of you doing your job, despite all the training that you've watched, despite all the warnings not to click on a phishing link. Right? And even technical threats like ransomware have a fundamentally human component. After the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, we noticed a drop. The National Security Agency noticed a drop in the amount of ransomware coming out of Russia and coming out of the former Soviet republics. And it wasn't that NSA or CIA or the US government or allies actually did anything technical. It was geopolitical pressures, and it was sanctions that successfully influenced the human behavior that we saw, right? And so when we think of a silver bullet, when we think of sort of the industry wanting to bring a silver bullet in the form of a technical solution, right? We always see that it brings about three major weaknesses. And one, every technical solution to this human issue brings about another tool in a disparate tool stack. So now you have security operations centers, you have analysts that are toggling between 100 different tools all at once. You also see when we invest in tech, we're underinvesting in humans and underinvesting in their tradecraft and their ability to improve. And third, it gives us a false sense of security. By focusing so much on our tech stack, attackers just innovate around defenders and are able to be successful no matter what. And so my call is this: let's stop pursuing perfection. Perfect networks in cyber and perfect technology is impossible, because we've architected cyber systems, we've architected solutions that go against the grain of how humans operate and human workflows. Think of a couple years ago. The Los Angeles School Department was hacked and suffered a ransomware attack. When you ask the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, what happened and why, despite spending billions of dollars in cybersecurity every year, that happened, his response was, well, cyber is a team sport, it's everyone's responsibility. Everyone, including that second grade teacher, who's trying to juggle 30 energetic second graders to recess every day. You know, I have a 2-year-old nephew, and I couldn't even imagine just wrangling one person, much less 30 in one. And this is the person you're expecting when they see an email for a free vacation, finally a respite from 16-hour days with 30 second graders, a free vacation. You're expecting them to then say, oh, you know what? Let me click on the sender. Let me see if there's any misspellings. Let me forward this to my IT department. Right? And that is a fundamental failure, because there's a misalignment of incentives here. Right? Our systems are not working the way that humans work, which is incentives. Think of positive reinforcement. Think of social proof. Think of gamification. Right? What incentive does the employee have when they get that phishing email to forward it to IT? There's no incentive. So there's no incentive to go above and beyond. And this is a failure fundamentally of the systems. And that's the root of the problem, is that cybersecurity, for many companies, the way it's implemented, is a productivity tax. It's not an enabler of the business. So instead, what we need systems that work with humans, right? A good example that I could think of is zero trust architecture. Fundamentally, behind zero trust architecture is a recognition that we live in infected spaces, that humans are going to be humans, so we just need to do basic network segmentation. Zero trust works because it's architected around how humans operate. So for us to build really secure cybersecurity systems that work with humans, I want to introduce this concept called anti-fragility. I don't know if people have heard anti-fragility. It was coined by an NYU professor named Nassim Taleb. Anti-fragility basically divides the world and divides systems into three. One are fragile systems. Second is robust or resilient systems. And third are anti-fragile systems. So fragile systems are those that when there's stressors placed upon them, they break. Think of you drop a glass cup, it breaks, that's fragile. Robust systems or resilient systems are those when there's stressors placed upon it, it doesn't break. Think of a plastic cup. When you drop a plastic cup, or when those teachers, second graders, drop the plastic cup in the classroom, it doesn't break. But the third is anti-fragile systems, which are those that actually gain from stressors, that gain from disorders. From disorder and from volatility. Think, for example, of your immune system. That's an anti-fragile system. Humans, by nature, we're anti-fragile, right? We grow from stressors, we grow from new opportunities, we grow and adapt whenever we're faced with stress. Cybersecurity systems, the way that we've built them, are fundamentally fragile because we've engineered out that thing that would make it anti-fragile, and that is the ability to learn from mistakes. Because for cybersecurity, it's seen as perfection is the only option. There's nothing in between. And that brings me to my third and final, I only have three, truisms about cybersecurity. And that is that all cyber is personal, but human imperfection is both our greatest vulnerability and our greatest strength and our greatest opportunity. So what we need to do is we need to welcome breaches, right? According to anti-fragility, there's a couple of characteristics. There's 4 characteristics that define anti-fragility that we could build into our cybersecurity systems. One is this idea of via negativa, which is addition by subtraction. Less is more. Choose your idiom. And that's the idea that the less signal there is out there, the less stray voltage there is out there, the easier it is to secure it. Think of how hard it would be to secure a cybersecurity system where you don't know how many ports there are. You don't know where the API calls are going to. You don't know how many people have access to your system and who has access to your system. One innovation is called external attack surface management, right? And that is, can I map my entire network and understand what are all my IP addresses, what are all the different components of the network, and that's what's going to be able for it. That's going to be easier for it to be secure. The second is this idea of hormesis, which is controlled stressors and controlled disorder. Netflix has this concept of chaos engineering, which is when their engineers are developing in production, they're purposely placing stressors and simulating attacks on their production environment before it even goes live, so that once it's live in the wild, it's nothing the system hasn't seen before. The third is skin in the game. And that's the idea that when IT builds a system, it honestly doesn't care if the business can do what it needs to do on that system, and vice versa. So when the IT builds a system and the marketing department can't do personalization the way they need to, it doesn't affect IT. Also, when the marketing department has a win, IT doesn't get to celebrate in that win. And so there's no skin in the game for all parties involved. So most importantly, like an anti-fragile system embraces the human creativity and really celebrates the idea of humans being able to make leaps that a system just cannot operate. That a machine just cannot do. Now, I wouldn't be able to talk cybersecurity without talking artificial intelligence, but I'm purposely not talking AI here because AI actually just places fuel on the fire of the importance of humans. All it does is it accelerates the human decision-making cycle, the OODA loop, as some people in the military would know it as, right? And AI actually cannot replicate what humans can do in recognizing novel threats. Cannot replicate what humans can do as far as bringing context, right? AI needs context, and this is the sort of second law of AI, which is the more an AI model thinks like a human, the longer it takes to reason, the better the results that come out. So the AI piece is just similarly connected to the human piece. So as I close, I ask myself, why am I talking cybersecurity at a defense tech conference where there's war fighters, and we're about to hear some cool panels about autonomous ships and Ukraine, and why is the sort of the nerd getting up here and also talking about cybersecurity? And that's because fundamentally, the future of war is that of one of asymmetry. And to butcher Clausewitz, to put my own spin on Clausewitz, cyber is the continuation of war by any means. Cyber is fundamentally an asymmetric game. It takes an attacker one attempt, one success to be able to defeat a defender. That attacker could be a 15-year-old kid sitting in Moldova somewhere, being able to hack the United States military. So cyber is fundamentally an asymmetric, it's fundamentally an asymmetric discipline. And the way the U.S. government, the way the United States has traditionally approached cyber is that this asymmetry is actually our greatest weakness. And I would posit to the group here, I would posit to the team that if we successfully harness the power of humans, and we're successfully able to convert humans from being assets, from being liabilities into vulnerabilities, that's the way that we can flip the switch on cyber being an asymmetric threat to the United States instead of being an asymmetric advantage for the United States. In every war, it's the best humans, not the best tech, that have always won. And that's going to be the case as we look to the asymmetric threats of tomorrow. And America has that magic formula. America has the technological innovation. It has the humans. It has the capital. It's just a matter of, are we applying it the right way and building our tech that wraps around the human instead of the other way around? So thank you.